Hi everyone, this is Medea Wolf, and I want to talk a little bit about the role of the body in feminist witchcraft. And the way I want to do this talk is around understanding the philosophical background that frames the modern debate about the category of woman. So the purpose of part one is to understand this firestorm that surrounds this female-centered cosmology and practice that many of us use in feminist witchcraft. And to do that, I want to selectively define some of the concepts that underpin modern feminist thought. So we often talk about feminism as waves, so I just thought we'd quickly review the waves of feminism. These are extremely debatable, and it's very difficult to mark the end of one wave and the beginning of another. But in general, for the sake of categorizing our missions, I will talk about the feminism waves in terms of first wave, second wave, and third wave, or the current wave is the third wave. The first wave of feminism was about the right to contract and the right to vote. This was about women trying to assert the fact that they were autonomous human beings with the right to hold property and sign contracts, that they were not either under the authority of the father or the husband. And that was around the 1860s to the early 1900s. The second wave of feminism worked on a really broad social mission, and it had to do with the idea that there was a category of women, and that women were one of many oppressed social categories. This was very much part of a larger civil rights movement from the 60s through the 80s. And this civil rights agenda included African American rights. There was Native American political struggles that were happening then. Anti-war movements were occurring from a woman-centered point of view. The right to choose was a huge movement at that time, and also reproductive freedom or sexual freedom. What's been at issue, I think, has been this political and economic set of theories that frame the debate. These theories were primarily related to Karl Marx, and they had to do with the idea that women and others, including children or African Americans as slaves, or oh my gosh, there are so many social categories, Native Americans being somehow less than human, and therefore we needed to be their patron. The idea there is that these political and economic theories were that these other people were considered property, and therefore we could do with them as we wanted. So the notions of oppression they were very, very much tied up in power held in giant classes and groups, and then oppression by those big groups onto other groups. So one big class of people, men, the political elite, somebody who holds a certain language can oppress some other group, women or people who speak a native language or something like that. So the idea was these large social categories and oppression by some social category to some other social category. The present or third wave feminism refers to woman as a socially constructed category, a social category. This has been started in the 1980s, and it's currently our wave of feminism. And some people refer to this as micropolitics. That is, that the politics are enacted not in these large social groups, but in the daily lives and even in the language of people as they interact in the social world. So I wanted to talk about a few of the theories or philosophies that underpin or undergird the current political feminist movement. The first one is social construction, and the idea here is that there's a class or a social position of a person or people is a socially constructed category. So that means that people within a group inside a context will agree about the nature of some group or class of people. And language is the primary vehicle through which social reality is constructed. We have ways that we communicate and words that we use for things, and by using those words and by framing reality in certain sorts of linguistic or mental ways, we affirm and support and promote some sort of social reality. The other less commonly discussed but really important piece of social construction is the idea of practice. Practice is the things that we do. So it's the way that we act, the way that we move, the way that we organize ourselves in our room or our situation. So the practice that we carry out is another way that we reinforce some sort of social construction or mental category or linguistic category. So mental activity, linguistic activity, and practice are all sort of three pillars through which social construction is attained and maintained. And the beauty of social construction is that since societies made these categories and enact these activities, they can unmake them. So we can change our vocabulary, we can reject categorization, we can change the way that we operate in a social context and therefore change the world. Post-structuralism is a theory, I believe it originated in France, and it was a philosophy, or maybe it's a theory that understands the nature of Western thought. Western thought being opposed to Eastern thought. Western thought including things like all of Europe, perhaps North America, parts of North America even. And it's a framework of logic. So the idea in post-structuralism is that Western thought is a structure of logic. And in this structure of logic, concepts are defined in terms of what they are not. So this is referred to as binary opposition. So that there's a thing, and then there's the thing that is not that thing. And so you have two things that are defined in relation to one another. So the symbol for that when you're writing about structuralism is this sort of double colon. So you might say a male is in binary opposition to female. Public is in binary opposition to private. Culture in opposition to domestic. Light in opposition to dark. Good in opposition to evil. Binary categories also, the logic of binary categories is that they also exist in association with one another and in association with those that are opposite. So male is public, is culture, is light, is good. Female is private, is domestic, is dark, is evil. So that's huge, right? It's huge in terms of how you construct a society. Finally, the logic the structure or the structure of the logic in application in a social situation is that these categories exist hierarchically. So male is public, is culture, is light, is good, is in opposition to female, which is private, domestic, dark, and evil. You can see this extremely well in notions in Christian religion, where you can see, or even witchcraft, the history of witchcraft, and the notion that a witch is a female who is somehow dark and evil and sexual and hidden and frightening. So post-structuralism is the idea that we can create a culture that rejects binaries. So we're post-structural. We're going to reject binaries, and we're going to reject the logic that these are static, essential, hierarchical categories. And one of the activities we do to do that is we do deconstruction. So deconstruction is this activity that we're going to take an argument and we're going to discover some hidden logical structure that's held within it, and we're going to take that apart so we can reconstruct, or what we might say is socially construct, a new reality. The last concept I want to talk about is postmodernism. Modernism was an Enlightenment enterprise, and it went on for hundreds of years. And modernism was a philosophical tradition that was searching for the ultimate truth. So the modernist enterprise was looking for grand overarching theory that could explain everything, or everything together in some totality. Examples of modernist concepts: one was natural selection, that was declared that it could explain all of evolution, or the idea of unconsciousness that would explain all of human behavior. So the argument in postmodernism is that all truth is contingent, or relative, or specific, or cultural. So postmodernism is the understanding of the relative. The mission in postmodernism is to assert that any truth is relative. So we reject large sweeping categories in favor of situated realities. And we understand that people have multiple realities that are situated socially and culturally. And you might have a reality when you're with your family that feels different than your reality when you're with your witchcraft sisters, which is different than your work life. So these realities are true and real and situated, or relative. Reality, then, is subjective. Any person's truth must be accepted as real. Only a person can define their own reality, and their reality is what they say it is. In postmodernism, we understand, just like in post-structuralism, that language holds these set of assumptions, and these assumptions need to be unpacked or deconstructed to reveal hidden assumptions that are dangerous, assumptions about truth or reality. And since meaning is sourced from the individual, one's identity is only for them to claim and for them to define. Finally, we would talk about understanding that any kind of generalization doesn't make sense, because identity is influenced by a myriad of truths. Everything from sex, race, gender, region, class, experience, employment, education, country, migration, language, the list goes on and on and on.